You are Locked On Wolves Postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
T-Wolves survive overtime. Final score versus Sacramento, 130-126. What's going on? Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves Postcast episode right here, Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Andrew Dukowitz making his first appearance of the season. It's a Lukey and Dookie performance tonight. That's what we got going on. Okay. Give him a follow at @DukeMNNBA, insider for zonecoverage.com. Plenty to break down tonight, including the fourth quarter meltdown. Plus, what in the world is the identity of this team? But first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Game Time. Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. All right, man, this game was like 20 times better than Tyson versus Paul. I'm going to tell you that right now. Tyson versus Paul is what they wanted. Ant versus Fox is what they got. We got an absolute slugfest, bro. 96 points combined by those two dudes alone. That in itself is unbelievable. We could spend 30 minutes on that, literally alone. But let's just back up. Let's talk about how we got there for a second. Wolves are up 20 in the third quarter. Fourth quarter collapse. They lose the fourth quarter by 16 points, 33-17. We go to overtime. Wolves hold on in overtime thanks to some huge three-pointers specifically. I'm still sweating from this one, man. But let's just start. Fourth quarter, overtime, work our way back. How did they build the 20-point lead? How did they blow it? And what happened in overtime to seal it?
I mean, they built the 20-point lead by playing kind of their brand of basketball. I mean, ball movement, don't turn the ball over a whole lot. And then they played, Fox, excluding Fox, they played okay defense through most of the game. And then the fourth quarter happened. And the defense, the wheels fell off of it. They didn't have an answer for Fox. No. When they kind of lost confidence in guarding Fox, they didn't have an answer for anyone else. And then, they had a chance to win it in regulation. They probably could have won it in regulation. Luckily, McDaniels hits the three he missed in overtime. Ant hits a three, and they kind of eke it out. But, my kind of general reaction to this game is just kind of yikes. Coming off of the two losses at Portland, you'd think they would be able to hold that lead and just kind of coast into a win.
What are like the biggest one or two plays that kind of stick out the most right now? Because it got so dramatic, it got so tight, so intense at the end. It's kind of easy to miss or forget some big plays. I know it's still raw, I know it's still fresh, but what's the plays that really jump out to you the most? Because, again, this was a back and forth slugfest in crunch time specifically, and there was plenty of big plays to choose from.
Honestly, that Jaden three in overtime, I think as someone who covers the team and I'm credentialed, so I'm at practices and I'm around these guys, like Jaden desperately needed that three to go in. He needed the one in regulation to go in. If he would have missed that one, like we might have had to send a wellness check out on the plane because he'd be in a dark place. Honestly, the next thing is also on Jaden, the fifth and sixth fouls. Yeah. It's just the story of Jaden McDaniels is he plays good defense, but he just can't keep his hands to himself. And honestly, like both of those fouls weren't really necessary.
No, 100%. Yeah, no. Again, I wish we had more time because there's so much to go over, but I would love to get you and Jack Borman on and just dissect Jaden McDaniels' game, specifically the last just couple of days, because it goes back not just even a year, but multiple years. Like, he's just such a wild card to this team, isn't he? Like, if he can figure out the offensive side of the ball, it just feels like it unlocks so many different things, so many different variables for this offense. But as we know, as we've seen, it's just inconsistent night in and night out, and you just don't know what you're going to get. How badly did they need this game, though? Because 3-game losing streak coming in, 2 brutal losses versus Portland in a row. You think about if they lost this one after a 20-point lead, the sky would be falling. And I know it's just one game, but like, how badly did they need this one for their confidence, for their morale, for their overall psyche, all that stuff?
I have a piece coming out tomorrow on zone coverage that kind of covers the Portland losses. And going into that piece, I kind of compared it as new teams like this are going to struggle. I mean, when you have a high usage guy like Randall, when you have Dante who gets a lot of threes up until he was pulled from the rotation, even Ingles is new. Dillingham and his 3 minutes is new. Like, new teams struggle. And the best example of a new team, like the gold standard, is like the big three Heat. They started the season off 9-8 in that 2010-2011 season. Even the best constructed teams with the best players, when they're new, they struggle. That being said, with Anthony Edwards, with Julius Randle, with Finch, and all of them saying that they want to be a team that closes out games this year, if they would have dropped 2 to Portland, the heartbreaking one against Miami, and then lost this one, I think there would have been kind of all the right to have pitchforks in the street. I mean, a 20-point blown lead after losing 2 games to Portland, who should be a top 3 pick, that would have been tough.
That would have been brutal. And again, huge bounce back tonight. A win is a win. Badly needed to snap this funk, this 3-game losing streak. But regardless of the win tonight, let's just take a step back for a second before we get into segment 2. Where was your panic meter at? I mean, you kind of hinted at it, but with just how sloppy and how little, we'll get into the identity a little bit more, but the lack of identity, I should say, they've played with up to now. Where was your panic meter? Because for me, to your point, like, you look back, even just at a lot of other successful T-Wolves seasons, some of the best T-Wolves seasons we've had, and almost all of them started out the gate very slow. So for me, it's like I'm not ready to hit any panic button until even like January-ish. Like, if it still looks this way another 15, 20 games, okay, I'm not going to be happy. But overall, right now, 7-6, I guess, where's your panic meter at with just how sloppy things have been, or how slow of a start compared to, our general expectations compared to the preseason thoughts?
I think before the game, panic meter was probably at like a 2 or a 3.
Sure.
They have all of the excuses in the world, and they're all valid excuses. Rudy's a tough player to play with. You have 2 rotation guys trying to learn how to play with him. Mike dealt with the wrist injury. He couldn't do his normal like Pilates or yoga or whatever Mike Conley does in the spare times during the summer. He couldn't do it. So he was pretty much came into the season not, in typical Mike Conley peak shape, wrist aside. And I mean, you have a lot of players trying to figure out new roles. Nikhil's never been a point guard. He's kind of a pseudo backup point guard now. Like, my panic meter wasn't very high because there's just so many moving parts. Like you said, though, if they're still playing this way on their Christmas Day game, then I think it's like, okay, you guys have had 30, 35 games. What's going on here? That being said, like, if they would have lost this game, it would have piqued my interest a little bit more of like, what's the adjustment? Because you got the big lead and you have Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Anthony Edwards, all premier defenders in this league. And you can't slow down De'Aaron Fox to where he's franchise record 60 points on 35 shots.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Yeah, good point. Great breakdown. Plenty more deep dive from this one. I want to get into the identity of this team a little bit more. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, FanDuel's giving you a chance at a huge return, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed with your first $5 wager. When you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Again, that's $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Go check it all out over at FanDuel.com. Get in on some NBA future action while you're there. Anthony Edwards MVP odds still sitting at 8.5 to 1. Feels like some good value. It's all sitting up over at FanDuel.com. Again, check it all out over at FanDuel.com and get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 wager. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. I just want to pick up where you left off. What's kind of your assessment of Finchie right now? Because to your point, a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces. I guess if you were Finch or you were in the coaching meetings, what do you want to see him switch up and change the most, if anything?
I'd like to see Rob more.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think, again, I'll preface it as like, I'm at the practices and he is working his tail off. He's there every practice I've been to except for one. He's staying late with Pablo Prigioni. I post a lot of stuff on my Twitter, cheap plug, Dukowitz, but a lot of video stuff. But he's there every practice working on stuff. And it's just kind of like, can we carve out 8 to 10 minutes to just see him?
Yeah.
Other than that, I really don't have an issue with Finch. I think he has to kind of give Mike Conley these opportunities to either succeed or fail. If it is a conditioning thing, Conley should return to the mean. I think his Randall minutes have been good. Jace Frederick of the Pioneer Press has kind of been on it all year. He has 8 starters. It's really hard to find that 9th and 10th bench minutes when you have 8 guys that arguably should be playing 30, 32 minutes a game. So I don't really have a lot of critiques on him other than like, I'd selfishly like to see Dillingham get a shot.
I think you are echoing what so many fans have came on the chat or even in the comments the next day and talked about. Everybody wants to see Dillingham for sure. To your point, where are those minutes coming from? How do you do it? How do you do it? And by the way, I love to hear the insider information that, he looks the part in practice. That's where it starts, right? In any sport, that's where it starts, right? But how do you get there? And I think we will get there eventually, by the way. Yeah. I think it's only a matter of time. And they know that for sure. They know the only way this guy can develop and progress and get to the point where they thought they were getting, the guy they thought they were getting with the number 8 overall pick, he's just got to play. And you could say that for any sport. Sometimes you just got to log those reps under your belt. Who's he carving minutes from, though? Because to your point, it's a pick your poison, right? Double-edged sword. Catch 22 right now with that.
I mean, you're right. Are you going to take 8 minutes from Mike Conley at this point? No, you kind of got to let him play it out and see if he is, just lost the step. Dante needs minutes. Nikhil needs minutes. You're not taking him from Ant. So it's just hard. I do think after this team has kind of gelled more and is like it's fully realized Timberwolves 2024-25 team, then you can say, hey, Mike, you're sitting, if there's 3 games in a week, you're sitting one of them, or you're cutting his minutes to like 20, 25 to save him for the playoffs. But right now they just need to build chemistry. So it's hard to justify it. The other thing I thought was really interesting, it was actually Joe Ingles who said it earlier in the season of it really is hard to play just 5 minutes a game. Like it messes with your psyche.
There's no flow.
Get into a rhythm.
Yeah.
And thinking about a 19-year-old getting thrown into that role, that's probably not the best for him. So again, I'd like to see him. I like the guy. I think he's going to be a player in this league, but the Wolves are just kind of tied. I mean, where do you put him in? And if it's going to be for 5 minutes and he misses 2 shots every game, is that going to ruin his psyche for the year?
The other thing too is, and I agree, it starts, the A topic is maybe just resting Mike Conley a couple more games per month, right? That's probably where it starts. But the other thing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just trying to think back to last year. It felt like they had extremely great injury luck for the most part. I know Cat missed, 15, 20 games at a certain stretch, but, it just takes one injury, and it doesn't even need to be a starter. It doesn't have to be one of the big 5 either, but one injury somewhere in there. It's a long season, and I know this isn't football or hockey or maybe quite the barbaric sport that, the other stuff that we follow, but one injury, big domino effect, big trickle effect, and all of a sudden, Dillingham is getting those 8, 10, 12 minutes all of a sudden. You never know. I'm curious. What's the biggest differences you're seeing from last year's defense to what we've seen through these first 13 games? Rim protection, that's kind of a glaring blind spot right now without Cat, still clearly trying to transition and see and figure out what it all looks like. And, I guess that's kind of where my first initial knee-jerk reaction goes. But I'll ask you. I'll just toss it over to you. What is the biggest difference from last year's defense to the defense we've got through these first 13 games, I should say?
I think it's Naz Reid playing center. And I will say this as the proud owner of a Naz Reid towel, love the guy. He just is such a better power forward playing defense than a center. And I think a lot of other analysts and even fans have been kind of on that maybe they need to get a center in free agency or, see what Luka Garza can do. Or I don't know what the answer is. I think the Wolves are hoping that playing Naz Reid more with Gobert and less with Randall might help with the problem, and having Randall be kind of that small ball 5. I think what's interesting, though, is the Wolves are still coming into tonight 7th overall in defensive rating. They're still an elite defensive team.
Yeah.
And it's just so far off from what they were last year that it feels like they've taken such a big step back. But really, they're just, 5-6 points away from being the number 2 defense in the league. That's just a good couple weeks. So I think my hope would be as they get chemistry and as they kind of figure out how to best use Naz, kind of refigure out how to use Naz, that'll get cleaned up.
So to your point, it's not that the defense is bad this year. It's that last year's defense was just on another level. And the disparity, the contrast between last year and what we watched night after night, 82 games plus playoffs, to what we're getting now, it just feels like things are a little wonky and things are a little off. Clearly, again, there is still some transition and stuff they're trying to work through. But okay, so that's the defense. What about the offense then? I thought adding Julius and DiVincenzo, which, again, we could probably spend 30 minutes on DiVincenzo alone, but I thought that would be more than enough to compensate for Cat shooting, right? But right now, it just feels so night to night. It feels like, I'll be honest, you just never know what you're going to get so far. And again, small sample size, it's early, but what is the big differences from last year's offense, which, remember, defense was elite, like we mentioned. The offense ranked middle of the pack at best in most categories. So last year's offense to this year's offense right now through 13 games.
So that's something a lot of people within the team were talking about in training camp, was we would be willing to sacrifice a little bit of defense, be third or fourth, to have a top 10 offense. The Wolves, again, coming into tonight, it'll probably go up a little bit after this game, but they're 12th in offense. They're okay. Yeah. I think when I was digging through it, the biggest thing I found offensively is in their wins, their offensive rating is 12.6 points better than in their losses. So to your credit, their offense is either really good or it's kind of atrocious. And there's no in between, which puts them at 12th, kind of middle of the pack offense. Again, I think it's just a chemistry thing. Dante in Portland went 1 for 9 from 3. He's not going to do that again, hopefully. I think Randall, as he figures out more of passing lanes and where people are and space, that'll get better. And then, Anthony Edwards, at some point this season, the 3-point attempts will probably go down a little bit. I know he's saying that he's going to keep shooting them, but I think at some point it'll regress to the mean. And when he gets more kind of in his groove, I think the offense will be clicking. I do think overall, though, this team is kind of right on pace to, at the end of the season, be that 4th or 5th best offense and 7th or 4th or 5th best defense rather, and 7th or 8th offense. And that's,
you can see the ceiling. You can see the ceiling. You can see the potential. It's just about, and this is every team talks about this, but it's just about doing it consistently night in and night out. So, okay, a lot of good points about the offense, the defense. What's the identity then? What's the identity supposed to be? Knowing their strengths, knowing their weaknesses, the starting 5, the bench, the depth, the coaching, all that. Who are we right now when an opposing team flips on our tape? Who are we right now, and who are we supposed to be, just given the way, the roster has been constructed?
I think they want to be a defensive-centric team that's better on offense. Like I said, I think they truly are okay being 3rd or 4th defense top 10 offense. Let's roll the ball out in the playoffs and go. Right now, they remind me a lot of like the 22-23 Wolves, where against good teams, they play it close. I mean, Sacramento, they beat them twice. They played the Nuggets really well. And then against the bad teams, they just don't wake up for whatever reason, or they blow big leads, or like Portland, they're just letting players go off and it looks like the effort might not be there. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of what we saw in San Antonio too. Like if you're a double-digit favorite by Vegas, you should probably win the game. It's now been 3 games where they've been kind of double-digit favorites and lost. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the unfortunate identity they're falling into right now, is if you're a good team, you got a game plan them like they're going to play 48 minutes. And if you're the Pistons, the Bulls, Portland, Washington, you come into those games going, wow, we could steal one. Like they just might not wake up.
It almost reminds me of the Wolves 2 years ago, where you saw the ceiling. They would go beat a top 5 team in the league, and then they would come out the next game and lose to a bottom 5 team in the league. Yep. Like you see the potential, you see it. And remember, that was year 1 of Rudy, during the Rudy trade, and then Mike Conley comes in halfway through. So again, to everybody's point that we've talked about and really hammered home, it takes time. It just takes time, and it feels like after that trade. Let me ask you about this trade. 13 games in, super small sample size still. I'm only going to ask you this because on Wednesday night, after their 3rd loss in the row, 2 in a row to Portland specifically, we came on here, Jack and I. There was a lot of frustration just in general about the lack of production, and goes back to the identity with DiVincenzo and Julius, just both very inconsistent game to game. What is your early season impressions and kind of thoughts right now of that Cat trade? Like, at least compared to what you thought when it initially all went down, 2-3 weeks before the season started? Like, what grade are you dishing out right now, and why?
So, grades. If I was going to give it a grade, I'd say that New York is probably winning that trade right now. Objectively, Cat is doing better in New York than Randall and Dante are doing here. I do think Cat is an easier player to just plug in. Like, he is his own. I mean, we saw it with the Wolves. He's his own top tier, offensive player. Jalen Brunson's going to be able to figure out how to play with Cat a lot faster than Rudy Gobert is going to figure out how to play with Julius Randle, or a younger guy like Anthony Edwards is going to figure out how to use Dante. I do think at the end of the season, we're going to have a different version of Dante and a different version of Julius Randle than we're seeing now. That being said, again, you can see the flashes of, Julius Randle in the post where he does those weird jump passes where he sails it into the corner, and Dante's there for 3. At some point, Nikhil will be there. At some point, Jaden will be there. And those are things that we didn't have with Cat. So you can kind of see at least the flashes of it. Now it's just, does it all come together?
A lot of good points there. We got a couple minutes left. I want to talk about this Suns game coming up Sunday and just the Western Conference right now. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode also brought to us by BetterHelp. Listen, when your schedule is packed with work projects and more, it's easy to let your priorities start to slip, right? Even when we know what makes us happy. But when you feel like you got no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy, they're more important than ever. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, it's time to give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. So simple. All you got to do, you fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched up with the licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Go visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, now you got the Suns up next. That's Sunday afternoon. Obviously, some recent history with them going back to last year's playoffs. Just top 2 or 3 bullet points or headlines or news notes, whatever you got when you think of that matchup, just top of your head. Because I feel like that's another good litmus test. 9-4 record, they're cooking right now.
I mean, I think it's honestly a good chance for the Wolves to prove they're not going to fall into a trap. I'm looking at the injury report right now. No Durant, no Beal, Nurkic and Grayson Allen are both listed as questionable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it could just be Devin Booker and Tyus Jones. And
hey, we'll take whatever we can get at this point.
I'm just saying that if it's Devin Booker and Tyus Jones, that'll be a good chance to see if the Wolves can wake up for a 2:30 game on Sunday.
Yeah.
When they know that players are injured.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is just, I mean, I wish Kevin Durant was playing, because I think that USA team stuff with Ant and Katie and the playoff stuff with Ant and Katie is going to make that matchup kind of must watch until Katie's career is done.
Obviously, this is a T-Wolves show, but I got to just real quick ask, 60 seconds. What do you like about the Kings? What did we learn about the Kings sitting down and watching essentially 5 quarters with them? I'm a fan, man. Sabonis, Fox, DeRozan. They feel like a feisty team with a huge ceiling the longer this season plays out.
So about the Kings, I think my favorite thing so far is the PA announcer when Keegan Murray scores and the PA guy goes Keegan, and then the whole crowd screams Murray. That's dope. We need that.
You love that kind of stuff.
I don't know if we can do it for Mike Conley or something, but like, we got to start doing that for someone on the Wolves.
I mean, we do have Naz Reid Towel Day. We got stuff. But like, we don't have that.
Really cool.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is just like Domantas Sabonis. Every time I watch him play, I honestly forget how good he is in between Kings games and in between Pacers when he was with the Pacers.
Yes.
Because even when Cat was here, he would just dominate.
He's so good.
It doesn't matter who he's playing against. He can score from outside. He can score inside. His footwork's perfect. He plays good defense. That guy just deserves so much more recognition. And I myself am guilty of it, because when we are not playing the Kings, I kind of forget he exists.
You're not the only one. I feel like if a bunch of NBA expert writers, ESPN, CBS, all these guys wrote top 10 most underrated players, even he would still be on that list, I feel like. You know what's going on with the East and West, man. I mean, 3 teams in the East are above 500. Cavs are 14-0. They whooped up on Chicago tonight. 3 teams, though, are above 500. In the West, you got 9 teams above 500. I get it. We're only 3 weeks into the season. That's all going to even out a lot more. It has to. But that's wild, man. I knew the West was stacked. Everybody did. I knew the East was just not very good. We all did. But that's got to be like a historic trend we're on right now, is it not? Like, what does that tell you, or what are we supposed to glean from that maybe we didn't already know going into the season, if anything, I guess?
I mean, I think a lot of it is Cooper Flagg, right? Like,
yeah, wow, good point.
I mean, it's hard to want to win games when you could get a shot at him. I mean, the other side of it is just whether it's like conference realignments or they change the playoff system. This has kind of been happening where the West is so much better than the East. I mean, for decades. I mean, even going back to like the Kevin Love Wolves that missed the playoffs going 40-42, and I think they would have been like a 5 seed in the East.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just kind of been a trend where the West always has better teams, which, I mean, when you have 3 teams in California and teams in Texas, and it kind of makes sense. I'd want to go play basketball where it's warm, but if this is how the season finishes out, where it's again like the 10 seed in the West would be a non-playoff 5 seed in the East, you got to think that NBA is going to be at least trying to figure out how to realign playoffs.
Well, does it just start and end with the superstars, with the absolute studs? I mean, Luka, Ant, LeBron, Curry, Shea, Sabonis. I mean, we could go on and on. I feel like you just lay them all out on a piece of paper. It just feels so lopsided in the West when it comes to the superstars, right? Yeah,
I completely agree with you. The West has a ton more talent, which is, again, like, come playoffs, like, some of those guys aren't going to be in there, whether it's if the Warriors get knocked out in the play-in again, if the Lakers don't make it into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know Kawhi Leonard and James Harden aren't, consistently playing, but if they hypothetically were, the Clippers might get knocked off. And then you're watching the Eastern Conference playoffs where the Brooklyn Nets could be a home court team.
It's just insane, man. It's almost comical. That's all you can do is laugh. Final parting thoughts before we get out of here. Last 60 seconds, you get it all. Empty the clip, so to speak, after tonight's game. Just an absolute slugfest. Very dramatic. Came down to the wire. Any other notes, observations, takeaways, for good and bad? Just lay it all out there.
I'm going to give a shout out to the former Sacramento Kings / Cincinnati Royals scoring record, Jack Hyman. He set that record January 15th, 1960.
Wow.
59 points against the Minneapolis Lakers. So,
wow.
Boy, does things come full circle. And Jack Hyman, if people don't know, he used to be a commentator. He actually, one of his teammates fell and got a traumatic brain injury, and Jack Hyman helped take care of him for the rest of that teammate's life, raised money. There was no health insurance back there. Dude deserves a shout out.
Unbelievable pull you just pulled there, man. Unbelievable fact and stat right there.
Dude deserves a shout out.
Dude deserves a shout out. All the NBA historians, Minneapolis Lakers historians, they're going to love that one, man. You brought the heat for sure to close us out. Great stuff, man, as always. Wolves bounce back. They survive overtime. Final score, 130. 126, 3-game losing streak snap. That's good. They moved to 7-6 on the year. As always, huge shout out to all the everydayers out there that always make us your first listen. And all you guys always coming in the chat, venting, celebrating, whatever it may be with us game to game. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and go follow all of Andrew's work on X at @ADukeMN and all the work he's always ripping out over at zonecoverage.com as well. Wolves Suns, that's Sunday, 2 p.m. tip-off. Catch you right here, same time, same place. But until then,